Welcome to the Scarlet Faithful podcast, episode 89. I am host and co-owner Aaron Breitman, coming to you on Friday, June 9th, just minutes after the breaking news that Paul Mulcahy has entered the transfer portal and will play his final season of college basketball elsewhere. He is leaving Rutgers. He put out a statement. He did not go too far or give really any detail. It was really it was a classy gesture in terms of what he said. Thanking Rutgers, talking about all the positives that happened in turning around the program, and also some of the charitable work that he did. But he didn't give a reason. He just said, with my final year of eligibility, I will be entering the transfer portal. He thanked Pikel. He talked about being New Jersey's point guard. He's also donating 457 meals based on how many assists he's had to Elijah's Promise in New Brunswick. That's a classy gesture. But that's all he said. So it's June 9th, and bottom line, college basketball right now is upside down with the transfer portal and NIL. So there's a lot to cover here. There's some adrenaline, there's some emotion. I'm trying to compose my thoughts. But what I would first say is it's absolutely his right to do this. If he has an opportunity to get a NIL deal that is more profitable, or I guess financially beneficial to him for his future, his family, however, whatever, it's America, it's capitalism, he has a right to do that. There's times in life where it's not the decisions you make that are necessarily wrong, right? He has absolutely the right to do this. I think that the hardest pill to swallow is the timing. It's June 9th. If Paul had decided to do this in April, it's a completely different conversation. We were critical of Cam, rightfully so, for doing so in May, for leaving. That was an unexpected departure. Paul's now doing it 3 weeks later. So obviously it was a bit of a red flag when he did not announce, when he did withdraw from the NBA draft last week, and he did not announce his return. I was still optimistic. I still thought he was going to return. In understanding the process this week, this was, a kind of a back and forth situation. He was, in terms of what he was going to ultimately do, and I don't think he didn't announce that last week because he knew he was leaving. I don't think he knew he was leaving. I think he just, he had a lot to think about. Paul is I don't want to say, well, there's a lot of things there, right? There's a lot of factors. He had a tough year last year. He had there was a lot of criticism of him from fans, some fair, some not. He played injured. He shouldered a lot of the responsibility. He took on a greater leadership role. There was a lot of frustrations that he exhibited on the court. NIL is a changing landscape. He's obviously done a lot of positive. He just won the NIL Advocate of the Year for the NIL Summit. He wrote when he came back, or I think it was Monday, it was an eye-opening event. Maybe he went to that event, and I put it this way. Whatever is said, if you want to know how Paul Mulcahy feels about Rutgers and Coach Pikel, then watch his press conference in March at the end of the season press conference and that loss to Hofstra. That was raw emotion. He was extremely thankful for Rutgers. He was extremely thankful for Coach Pikel. He talked about how Coach Pikel, always takes the hits for them when things go wrong. He always takes the blame. That was a beautiful moment in terms of his appreciation towards Pikel and the program and the university and all that. So he's leaving 3 months later, and then if that was his goodbye and he was like, listen, I'm just moving on, that's that's understandable. But to then not leave and, I mean, he went to that same Our Fun dinner that Cam went to a month ago. Paul was with him. They're roommates. Paul's been a face of the program. This decision came about now. And I do think there's some similarities to Cam in terms of how Cam's value as a grad transfer went up after the portal deadline for undergraduates passed. And I think in Mulcahy's case, his value then went up after the NBA withdrawal deadline passed. And you have some teams that lost players that they maybe didn't expect to lose. And you also have teams that lost out on other targets. And I mean, tampering is a reality of the world of college basketball right now, and it stinks. And Rutgers has been tampered with heavily. This absolutely has happened with Paul. Teams are in contact with him, and I'm very confident in saying that. And I think you don't leave on June, whatever wants to be said publicly, you don't leave on June 9th in the way the landscape is now if NIL isn't a factor, right? And I know that Rutgers has made him a priority with NIL. So it's not that Rutgers dropped the ball. I don't think that that's the case. I do think that based on, like I talked about last season, Mulcahy being frustrated, the criticism, all that, I think a change of scenery could be a positive for him. I actually do. But I don't think as a player you make this decision on June 9th to leave if there isn't some type of NIL component factored into your decision. Right? It's not a matter of playing time. It's not. He's leaving he's leaving home. He's leaving a program that he is as well established as anyone. He is the face of the program, even more so than Cliff. He is the leader. It's fair to question kind of his leadership style last year, and I think, this is my take. This is not. I'm not trying to. I think first of all, as a core member of the group that helped turn the program around, Paul deserves a certain level of respect, a certain level of reverence forever, right? I do think that Geo Baker, Ron Harper Jr., Caleb McConnell, I think that they are held by most fans in a category of their own in terms of their contributions to the program. But I also think for how they went about their business, those guys, first of all, they were here first, right? They were here even a couple years before Paul, or I guess Gio was. Ron and Caleb were the year before, but they all went through a little bit more in terms of the program being in worse shape. They basically, it's like that the Shawshank Redemption line, crawled through, shit to get to the other side. I mean, those guys crawled through it. Paul did too, but they were first. And I also think the way they went about their business, just in terms of kind of letting things fall off their shoulders. They smiled more times than not. They kind of, stared back at adversity and criticism, and they overcame a lot of obstacles. And I think that they rightly are held in a very high regard. Now, there's other players that had big impacts, Miles Johnson, Jacob Young, Akwazi Yeboah's 1 year, Cliff, obviously, and Paul. Paul is a huge piece of that. 2 years ago, when their backs were against the wall, when they were done, essentially, by the end of January, they lost to Northwestern by 1 on the road. They were left for dead. Rutgers made college basketball history, winning 4 straight games against ranked foes as an unranked opponent. It never happened before, it never happened since. Ron, Gio, Caleb, Cliff all played well. The catalyst for that historic run was Paul Mulcahy. He played out of his mind. He was in a zone of zones. He turned into the white Magic Johnson. I mean, he played at a level that was as elite as I can imagine. And I've covered the stats before or whatever, but and it started with that Nebraska game. He had the tip in to win the game. Then they lost at Northwestern, but he had 31 points, 7 assists, and then he just, those 4 games they won. Obviously, Caleb kind of had the iconic moment with that block against Ohio State. Gio and Ron had some big shots. Cliff played well, but Paul was playing at another level. And I've written this many times. When Paul Mulcahy was at his best, Rutgers was too. And we saw it this past season. Everybody remembers Cam's shot against Purdue to win the game, but nobody remembers that Cam didn't take a shot for 12 minutes before that. And Paul is really, he was why they were in that position to win the game. And he also helped create that shot for that open look for Cam. But he had 16 points, 8 assists, 6 rebounds, 4 steals, and 0 turnovers in that game. I mean, that was that. I'd have to go back and watch a few, but I feel like that game might actually have been his best game in a Rutgers uniform. And then you have the Michigan State game where he just was, unbelievable. He was brilliant. He carried them. When he was at his best, Rutgers was at his best. So, yes, I know there's some detractors. I know there's some critics out there, and some people are actually going to be happy that he left. Rutgers is a worse basketball team without Paul Mulcahy. Did he have a pretty poor stretch those last 11 games last season following that Michigan State game? Absolutely. Was he hurt? Yes. Was he unable to kind of harness his emotions and fight through it? Yes. Was it pretty obvious that, his leadership style in terms of chewing out players on the court, in front of home fans, on TV, did that probably sit well with everyone? Probably not. But listen, that's almost not everybody can be. Everybody has to be themselves, right? And that's the kind of leadership style he had. And right or wrong, he the point is his heart was in the right place, and he tried, and he was doing what he thought he needed to do to be a leader. And it unfortunately, it wasn't enough to get them out of this slump that they finished the season with, going 3-8. He had a pretty bad stretch himself, but that shouldn't diminish from his entire career. He had 4 very good years here. He leaves 4th all time in assists. I have the stats somewhere here. My phone is just completely blowing up. Let's see. His career averages 6.8 points, 3.8 assists, 3.4 rebounds, a steal. He shot 45% from the floor, 36.4 from 3, 72% from the line. 2 years ago, he was the first Rutgers player to average over 5 assists in a season since Brian Ellerbe, almost 40 years before him. He leaves 4th all time in assists. He wasn't your traditional point guard, but he created matchup problems. He played with his heart on his sleeve. He played as hard as anyone. And he was a major contributor in Rutgers becoming a winning program in the Big Ten under Steve Pikiell. And he should always be thanked and appreciated for that. Now, the complicated part is his legacy in terms of leaving a year on the table. Again, he's completely within his right to do this. I do think the timing of this complicates things and is a little bit of a stain on his legacy. If he goes somewhere in the Big Ten, I'm very concerned that it's right or wrong is going to stain his legacy further. Like I said, I know multiple teams are talking to him. I know that there's at least one Big Ten team heavily involved. And it's going to be very interesting to see where he goes. But mostly I'm just sad because I really like Paul. I do believe that he truly does care about Rutgers. I think that, the NIL situation also puts these players in a difficult position where it's easy for fans to criticize a decision without knowing the details, without knowing the opportunities, without knowing the financials. Think about it with your own job. If you got offered a significant raise, are you going to just stay on principles? Now, again, doesn't mean that more money means a better situation, right? He's now leaving a program he's spent his entire collegiate career 4 years at, and within, a month, he's going to be somewhere else, and he's not really going to know how how he's going to be fully supported there. He's leaving a sure thing. Now, why would you leave a sure thing? Right? I mean, why do people make decisions in life? Right or wrong, a lot of times it has to do with money. So let's not kid ourselves. And I really hope whatever decision he makes, it's for the best for him. And I hope not only financially, but for him on the court, for him support wise, for him graduate school wise, all of that. I just hope it's not in the Big Ten, because I do think that that's going to, I don't want to see him come to the rack in another uniform. Not just because of the reality of seeing him play against Rutgers, but just the reception that he would get, right or wrong. And listen, some fans are going to be angry. Some fans are not going to understand. Some fans are going to be resentful. Some fans are, never going to think of him the same again. And at this point, when you leave now, everything should be, fair game, I think, in terms of you don't have a right to disqualify or minimize the impact that he had or try to rewrite the positives that he brought. But at the same time, everyone's allowed to react and kind of move forward the way they want to. And when you leave in this type of way, you open that door for, people not understanding, criticism. And I just hope that he's prepared for that. And I still respect him a lot. It's sad that he's choosing to go elsewhere. I understand why from a financial perspective, but it's a hard pill to swallow, just in terms of being a leader, being the face of this program now. What he's meant to New Jersey in terms of staying home. And for Pikel, I mean, this has got to be really tough. I mean, Cam was tough, right? But Cam was a 1-year player. You could use the M word with Cam, mercenary. Now he's at UConn, the defending national champs. Paul was our guy. Paul was our guy. And he's leaving. And he's leaving. I mean, off-season workouts start on next week in like 3 days. Rutgers goes overseas on a trip in less than 2 months. The semester begins in less than 3 months. There's now 4 open scholarships. They have to fill 3. I think they'll fill. I don't think they're going to fill all 4. You have to get another guard. I think, depending on the options, depending on that first kind of first player you get, what do you get the second player? Is it a guard and a wing? Is it 2 guards? Is it a shooter and a defender? Is it a creator and a shooter? Is it, guys that can defend multiple positions? It's going to be, I think you have to take best available options, and you figure it out. I do feel, and I already have a piece, it's going to be coming out right after this video, about the roster. I do feel pretty good about the 6-man core that remains. We're talking Cliff and Wolf. We're talking Andre Hyatt and Gavin Griffiths, and we're talking Derek Simpson and Noah Fernandes. That is a solid 6-man rotation. Now, it's thin. Muat Mag will join at some point. Hopefully it's in, the latest December, before conference play starts in full in January. But if he can recover and get back to normal, that's a good 7. But you need 2 more impact guys. They're going to get a backup big. I think it very well may come from the JUCO ranks like they have in the past. And, if it's a developmental guy, I think that's a good thing too, to have a multi-year guy. But I think in this case, with Paul and Cam both gone, 2 starters, you have Caleb gone, you need, if it's a grad transfer now, you need a guy that can step in and play big minutes and make a contribution right away. And I think you need the second guy to potentially do the same and or be a key rotational piece. Now it's June. The options are not what they were even 4 weeks ago. So it's going to take everything from the staff to be able to find the resource to do this. Now, is there a better? I would argue there's not a better staff that can handle these types of contingencies, handle these types of situations. They have plans for plans, backup plans for backup plans, and you should have confidence that they're going to figure this out. And again, like I said, they have a pretty solid core remaining still. We know the roster's set now aside from the open spots. Cliff coming back is even bigger now. Noah Fernandes, that just looms so large in terms of getting him. If they didn't have Noah Fernandes, I would say they're destined for the bottom 2 or 3 in the conference. With Noah Fernandes, so valuable now, so valuable. This is an opportunity for Derek Simpson to really, really develop and take the reins and blossom. Gavin Griffiths now has more opportunity. So there's some things to like here, and we'll get into that. But in terms of this loss, it's my overall feeling is sad. I wish him well. I hope that whatever he decides and where he goes is best for him. I do. But the timing stinks. And that's not really excusable, and I think that, again, it's not sometimes the decisions you make, it's how you make those decisions, and how you're impacting other people with those decisions, how you're taking that into account. And I think in this case, right or wrong, and maybe just opportunities came about now. Like I said, I think his value went up since the NBA withdrawal deadline passed. But that opens yourself up for criticism. And I think that's fair. I think it's fair to criticize him leaving on June 9th. That's not a good thing. Again, he has every right to do it. He's been a core member, a critical piece of Rutgers becoming a winning program, and it's sad to see him go. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens from here. It's, John Rothstein's wrong, by the way. You do not sleep in May. We have to rewrite that now. We're in the middle of June, and I'm not sleeping anytime soon. So another Friday of transfer portal news. I mean, Rutgers is the poster boy right now in terms of getting hit hardest with grad transfers leaving. I've talked about the NIL recently. Rutgers, I can tell you that Steve Pikiell's doing everything he can in terms of NIL. I think I'll end it with my last piece, that this type of situation, I think good can come from it. I think that this is a wake-up call for people at Rutgers, for donors, for others, that, hey, you know what? We need to do our best to try to prevent this from happening in the future. And this could be a catalyst towards progress with NIL. Again, I know that they were making Paul a priority with NIL. I'm sure other schools are coming in with higher numbers. I mean, they would have to, right? For him to leave the situation, it just... And, I guess you could say I'm being speculative saying he's leaving for NIL, but, I mean, Occam's razor, right? The most... kind of the most obvious reason is usually the reason, right? And why do people leave stable situations? They leave because of money. Unfortunately, I think that's the case here. Again, I don't know. He didn't clarify. I wish him the best. Rutgers basketball will move on from this. It's going to be, and I think there's some other benefits here in terms of ripping the Band-Aid off And I'll have more. I think I'm going to have another reaction video kind of on the roster moving forward after my article later today. So we'll talk more then. But thank you for listening and watching once again here at the Scarlet Faithful.